Sometimes, Jack, the ground remembers more than we do. Hattie Mayfield, the wind was wrong that morning. It came in dry, not dusty quiet, not whistling, and it carried no scent. Not sage, not cattle, not the sharp, clean trace of desert rain. Just heat, stale and watchful. It crawled over the porch like it had been waiting all night. Jack Whitaker stood shirtless on the creaking steps of his family ranch house, a chipped mug of black coffee trembling in his hand. Below the eastern range stretched wide and cracked dead grass rippling under the weight of August sun. Somewhere out there, between the thorn brush and the rusted fences, was the thing he planned to tear down today. The cathedral. That's what folks in Lincoln County called it, half joking, half praying. A termite mound so tall, so solid it looked like it had been sculpted by time itself. Locals swore it hummed on warm nights and shifted in the moonlight. Kids dared each other to touch it. Old ranchers wouldn't go near it. One man back in '72 tried to bulldoze it and broke the axle clean off his rig. Jack didn't believe in curses. He believed in numbers, and his numbers were bleeding out fast. The Whitaker Ranch had bled dry after 5 straight years of drought. Wells collapsed. Feed prices spiked. His last livestock sale barely covered the fuel bill. 2 days ago, he got a letter from the bank. Not a threat, just a polite, devastating promise, one more missed payment, and they'd own everything his family had broken their backs for since 1936. So when the state offered a one-time land-clearing subsidy for reclamation of unused pasture land, Jack didn't hesitate. The East Range had been fenced off since before he was born. According to the maps, it was fertile flat and perfect for new seed. If he could get rid of the scrub burn out the root rot and level the ground, maybe he could save the place. Maybe. But first, the cathedral had to come down. The engine of the old Komatsu excavator roared like it hadn't breathed in years. Jack drove it slow down the fence line, wheels crunching over old mesquite and coyote bones. His shirt was soaked with sweat before he even reached the rise. He saw the mound before he crested the ridge, towering nearly 12 feet high, solid as stone glowing faintly red under the sun. It looked wrong. Too smooth. Too symmetrical. The surface shimmered in places like the clay had been lacquered. He cut the engine and stepped out. "You sure you want to go messing with that?" A voice called from the fence line. Jack turned. Hattie Mayfield, wrapped in a patchwork shawl, despite the heat, stood with a mug of tea in one hand and an old shotgun in the other. She was pushing 80 blind in one eye and sharp as barbed wire. "I've got bills and a deadline," Jack said, wiping his brow. "I don't have time for ghost stories." Hattie didn't smile. She looked at the mound like it could hear them. "Your granddaddy used to say, 'The ground out here remembers more than we do.' You don't build on memory. You let it rest." "I'm not building anything," Jack muttered. "Just knocking down dirt." She sipped her tea, then reached into her pocket and tossed a handful of salt onto the path. "Just in case," she said, and walked away. The first strike hit harder than Jack expected. The bucket of the Komatsu sank into the outer crust and cracked it mid. A sound like bones under pressure echoed out from the wound. Dust plumed upward, thick and red, coating the windshield. Jack braced himself and hit it again. This time the mound shuddered. He paused. Inside the gouged surface he saw something that made him hesitate: tunnels. Layers and layers of them interwoven like arteries curving with inhuman precision. Termite work, sure but perfect. Architectural. He hit it again. The mound groaned like a dying animal. Chunks of hardened clay tumbled down. A third strike. A fourth. Then suddenly, clang! The bucket struck something that wasn't earth. The whole cab shook. Jack's teeth clicked together. The engine sputtered, and the air went completely still. He killed the machine. Silence pressed in. Jack stepped out, boots crunching over the broken clay. The exposed core of the mound revealed something metallic, not rusted, not buried long enough to be forgotten. He dropped to his knees, cleared the dirt with his hands, heart thudding faster now. What emerged was a curved steel plate, cool to the touch despite the sun. Around its edge, raised letters gleamed faintly in the dust. Property of U.S. government. Site B, 1954, do not open a hatch. Beneath the cathedral was a bunker. For a moment, Jack didn't move. His mind raced. This wasn't in any land survey. No one had ever mentioned government property on the Whitaker Ranch. And yet here it was, buried under a monument no one dared touch. Buried on purpose. He found the latches old rusted, tight as a safe. With a crowbar, he forced them loose. The hatch moaned open with a burst of stale metallic air that smelled like oil mold and something colder. A steel ladder led down into darkness. Jack looked into the black pit. At the edge of hearing, he thought he caught a vibration like the hum Hattie had warned about. But this wasn't termites. It was something deeper. He took a breath and climbed down. The metal rungs groaned under Jack's boots, each one slick with rust and damp with time. He descended slowly, flashlight clenched between his teeth, the stale air tightening around him like a vice. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It felt old, thick, and intentional, like something that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Halfway down, the scent hit him mildew copper, something chemical. Not strong, but sharp enough to slice into memory. He'd helped his dad tear down an old grain silo once. This smelled like that, but older. Rot tinged with machinery. The ladder ended at a narrow steel corridor, low-ceilinged and ribbed with reinforced beams. The walls were painted industrial gray, chipped in places to reveal corroded metal beneath. A red line ran horizontally along the base of the wall, faded almost to pink. Above it, the word "authorized only" stenciled in black. Jack stepped forward. His flashlight beam flicked across dust-heavy air and scattered cobwebs. Wires dangled from the ceiling. Broken switches. Dead gauges. At the far end of the hall, a rusted door hung slightly ajar. He pushed it open. Inside was a chamber no bigger than a horse stall. Low ceiling, bare concrete floor, and rows of metal shelves. Most were empty, but one corner was cluttered with stacked crates, sealed boxes, and a small desk with a rusted typewriter and a yellowing logbook. He approached the desk first. The book was leather-bound, cracked at the spine, but still intact. On the cover, in faded stamp, duty log, Site B. Jack opened it carefully. Names, dates, times, all handwritten in careful blue ink. Some pages listed routine checks, generator logs, ventilation, maintenance, meal rotations. Then something shifted. An entry dated August 2nd, 1958, geological readings unstable. Evacuation discussed. August 5th, partial collapse near shaft 2. No injuries. HQ notified. August 9th, evacuation complete. Lockdown ordered. No confirmation from HQ. Awaiting further instruction. Then nothing. The ink stopped mid-sentence like the writer had dropped the pen and never returned. Jack's hand trembled as he flipped the last page. At the bottom, scrawled in different handwriting, "Do not reopen." A sudden metallic creak snapped Jack's head around. Not from the hall behind him, from the crates. He stepped over. The boxes were government issue. Steel reinforced, padlocked, most labeled in stencils, Project Hollow Point. Classified material. Handle with care. He touched one of the boxes. Cold. Beside it, tucked into a shelf, was an old Kodak camera in a cracked leather case. Inside, a roll of unexposed film still sealed. He looked back toward the open door. The silence was no longer passive. It pressed against him like a held breath. He could almost feel the weight of the earth above him. "You don't bury steel that deep unless you never want it found," he muttered. He turned back to the crate. It was locked tight, but rust had weakened the latch. With a grunt, he broke it open. Inside were manila folders, water-damaged, but readable. Jack pulled one free. Diagrams, schematics, geological cross-sections, depth readings that went far below the surface levels marked on his father's land records. He didn't understand all of it, but one stamped title made his skin crawl: Void Chamber Survey. Unstable stratigraphy zones, Lincoln County, Sector 3B. His land. A footnote below: further drilling prohibited until seismic stabilization completed. Personnel rotation suspended indefinitely. He stared at it, his mouth dry. They dug here. Deep. Found something. Covered it up. The hum returned. Not loud. Subtle. Just beneath the edge of hearing, vibrating through the soles of his boots up his spine. He backed away instinctively. Then his flashlight flickered. A pop. Darkness. He tapped it. Nothing. Silence thickened. Then soft and steady, a light above him blinked on. An overhead bulb. Weak yellow, but functional. The room now seemed larger. Shadows pulled back. Jack saw another door at the far end of the chamber. Thicker than the first. Reinforced. A plaque bolted onto the center read, "Beach Chamber. Access restricted. Level 4 only." Jack stepped toward it. No handle. No lock. Just a single latch at shoulder height. He reached out. The metal was icy cold. It vibrated beneath his hand like it was holding something back. Something breathing behind inches of steel. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. But it wasn't empty. That much he was sure of. The hum now felt internal inside his chest, like a warning his body understood before his brain did. He backed away. Footsteps echoed behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just the open hallway. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. Someone had been down here. Maybe recently. He gathered the logbook, the camera, a few folders, and the roll of film. Stuffed them into his duffel bag. He had to get out. Think. Plan. Climbing back up the ladder, he didn't look back. But the hum followed him, lingering in his bones. When he surfaced, the air was hotter. The sun had shifted. He looked across the field and froze. A black SUV idled at the far fence line. Windows tinted, engine silent, watching. Jack ducked behind the ruined mound, heart hammering. The SUV stayed a moment longer, then drove off without a sound. He stared at the fading dust trail for a long time. They knew. Whoever buried Site B still had eyes on it, still had reasons to keep it buried, and now he was part of the story. As the sun dipped west and the desert lit gold, Jack sat on his porch, the duffel bag at his feet. Inside proof. Secrets. His grandfather's voice. His land wasn't just a ranch, it was a cover. He opened the camera case and stared at the film. What had they photographed down there? Why had they left in such a hurry? Why had his grandfather never spoken a word about it? Jack looked back toward the eastern range. The broken mound stood like a shattered monument. Tomorrow he'd go deeper. The tape in that recorder. He hadn't listened to all of it. He would. Whatever Project Hollow Point was, it hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. The recorder sat heavy on the kitchen table like it had been waiting to speak for years. Jack stared at it, palms flat on either side. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The hum from the bunker was gone, but something else had followed him home, an awareness, a pressure. Like his own land no longer trusted him. The reel was already loaded, labeled in faded pencil testimony. SH. He flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing but static. Then a voice crackled through low, tight, aged by time and fear. My name is Samuel Whitaker. Jack's breath caught. His grandfather. I was assigned to Project Hollow Point in July of 1956. I am recording this without clearance or approval. If you're hearing it, it means one of two things. Either someone finally found what we buried, or someone's trying to erase it again. The voice paused, ragged breathing through a dusty microphone. We weren't told what it was, not exactly. They said geological stability testing, seismic stress, vibrational wave mapping, deep soil resonance, fancy words for drilling into places that didn't want to be touched. Jack leaned closer, jaw tightening. They hit something under Lincoln County. Not just a void, a chamber. Natural, but wrong. Like the earth had formed it by mistake. Like it was older than it should have been. He heard paper rustling, a sharp breath. Then we collapsed part of it. Unintentionally. The readings went wild. Something shifted underneath like a cavity inside bone. We weren't supposed to be there. We felt it. Some of the men started getting sick. Nausea, dizziness, hallucinations. They pulled us out. The reel hissed again, dragging long seconds across silence. I filed the first formal warning. They shut me out. A week later, 2 of my team disappeared during a site sweep. They said it was an accident. But I saw their names erased from the rotation logs. Jack's fingers curled into fists. If this was shut down, it wasn't because they were done, it's because they failed. The reel clicked. The voice didn't return. Only the hum of the machine and the hollow pit forming in Jack's gut. His grandfather had tried to blow the whistle and had been buried with the fallout. Jack sat motionless for a while, the weight of it pressing in. Then slowly, he reached for the old Kodak camera and slid the film canister free. If this was a cover-up, then the real evidence might be in images. He needed someone who could help, someone who knew how to make film speak, and someone who wouldn't run the minute the words classified government site got whispered. He thought of only one person. Tanner Blake's office was more storage room than newsroom. Stacks of back issues of the Lincoln Observer filled every corner. Dusty trophies from high school journalism competitions lined the shelves. The old neon sign outside blinked like it hadn't made up its mind to stay on. Jack stepped inside. Tanner looked up, blinked, then laughed. Jack Whitaker. Haven't seen you since that flood story in '09. What brings you into the land of deadlines and unpaid invoices? Jack didn't answer. He set the duffel bag down on Tanner's desk and opened it. One by one, he pulled out the reel, the logbook, the documents, and finally, the film. Tanner's smile faded fast. What the hell is all this proof, Jack said. Buried in my east field, under a termite mound. A bunker marked Site B dated 1954. This film's from inside it. Tanner stared at him for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. You expecting me to write about? What exactly? Some Cold War Fallout government ghosts. This looks like the setup for a bad Netflix docuseries. Jack pushed the logbook forward, flipped to the final entries. Tanner read silently. Then again. Then again, slower. This is your grandfather's name. Jack nodded once. And that tape, Tanner said, eyes narrowing. His voice. Tanner tapped the reel. You played it every word. He warned them. They ignored him. Tanner let out a low whistle. You know what happens if I print something like this without proof, right? They shut me down. They sue. They vanish me in paperwork. Jack opened the folder with the stamped schematics and dropped it on top. You want proof? Look at the signature on this clearance form. Tanner squinted. Franklin B. Calloway, he read aloud. Why does that name, oh shit. He's still sitting on the House Defense Oversight Committee. Yeah, Jack said. And his name's on my family's land. Tanner looked up. Okay. Let's say I believe you. Let's say you're not crazy. What's your plan? Jack leaned in. We scan everything, digitize it, upload backups, and when we're ready, we drop it all at once. No teasing, no headlines. Just truth. Full detonation. Tanner ran a hand through his hair. You realize this could go federal in 5 minutes. They'll freeze my servers, block distribution. Then we prep redundancies, Jack said. We get off-grid hosts. We time it. And if they come after you first, Jack's jaw flexed. Then I hope they enjoy digging through termites. Tanner looked at him for a long second, then cracked his knuckles. All right, cowboy. Let's make some noise. That night, Jack returned home and locked every door. The eastern sky was darker than usual, no stars, just a low, angry smear of clouds. He took the film and set it on the kitchen table beside a notepad. One word he scribbled across the top. Why? Why had his grandfather stayed silent after being ignored? Why had he left that recording? Why had no one ever come to reclaim the site unless someone had been watching it this whole time? He stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and stared toward the East Range. The broken mound stood like a gravestone, but he saw something new. Tracks. Wide, deliberate, recent. Tire marks in the dirt, fresh enough that the dust hadn't yet blown them away. He followed them to the edge of the property line where they disappeared into Hardpan Road. His stomach turned. Someone had come back. While he was gone. He looked around, no footprints, no broken locks, just silence. But it wasn't peace. It was pause. Something was waiting. And it was his move now. The wind was still when Jack woke. No rustle, no hum. Just silence. But not the comforting kind, the kind that settles over a place when it's waiting for something to happen. He stepped outside before dawn boots crunching into dry gravel. The sky was still dark enough to keep the stars, but the east held a pale bruise of orange. The desert breathed in that color, slow and cold. Then he saw them again. The tracks. Wide, deep, freshly cut into the edge of his property line. And not the same ones from yesterday. These were new. A different tread pattern, deeper compression. Someone had been here again last night, maybe even while he slept. Jack crouched beside them. The edges were clean. Whoever it was, they weren't driving a ranch truck. This was something heavier. Government issue, maybe? Or military adjacent. Something with intent. He stood, breath visible in the morning chill. They weren't done watching. They were circling. His land wasn't his anymore. Not really. It was a chessboard. And he was standing on the wrong square. Inside the house, Jack loaded the last of the scanned documents onto a backup drive and wrapped it in an oilcloth. He stashed it in the false panel under the sink. Another copy went into the tack room under an old saddle blanket. The originals. He had other plans for those. He grabbed the duffel, stepped onto the porch, and froze. There was someone leaning against his gate. Wide stance. Ball cap pulled low. Sunglasses despite the morning dark. Unmoving like a shadow waiting for permission to speak. Jack didn't call out. The man didn't wave. Instead, he walked forward with a deliberate calm, holding a clipboard tucked under his arm. Another man followed behind, shorter, broader, carrying a small metal case. They stopped at the foot of Jack's porch. Mr. Whitaker, the one with the clipboard, said, smiling with no warmth. "David Cole. This is Mr. Linton. We're with the Environmental Risk and Site Safety Commission." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Never heard of it." "It's a joint initiative," Cole replied smoothly, "between Department of the Interior and the Department of Energy. We're following up on an unregistered excavation report filed anonymously yesterday afternoon." "I didn't report anything." "That's often the case," Cole said, smile still fixed. "We're here to ensure that any disruption to federally restricted soil is properly assessed. There's concern about biohazards contamination. Old military waste can be dangerous." Jack crossed his arms. "You here to ask questions or take things?" neither Cole said. "Just need a look at the area. Confirm what was disturbed. Possibly collect a few samples for safety purposes. That's all." Jack nodded slowly. "And if I say no," Cole didn't blink, "then we escalate the matter to federal jurisdiction. Your property would be subject to temporary seizure pending investigation. Standard process. We thought voluntary cooperation would be simpler." That word seizure hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jack stared at him. No dust on their boots. Shirts pressed. Car clean. They hadn't driven in from town. They'd come from somewhere. Sterile. He gave a tight smile. "You can leave your card." Cole slid a small laminated square onto the porch rail. No seal. No agency logo. Just a name, a number, and nothing else. The two men turned and walked back to the SUV parked neatly at the gate. The engine started silently. The vehicle turned slow and sure and vanished down the road. Jack stood there until the dust settled. Then he locked every door. They weren't bluffing, and they weren't alone. That night, Jack returned to the cathedral. The mound was already growing again, wet clay stacked with unnerving speed. Termites moved in rhythmic lines, rebuilding their empire without hesitation. He knelt beside it, careful not to disturb the center, and dug a shallow pocket beneath the soft edge. From his coat, he pulled a watertight pouch and pressed it deep into the clay. Inside were the original documents, the logbook, the photos, the stamped diagrams. Termites had unknowingly guarded a secret bunker for 70 years. They could guard one more. He covered the hole and smoothed the surface. When he stood, the mound looked untouched, the perfect camouflage. Back at the house, he checked the backup drives again. Still there. Still secure. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with the reel recorder, listening again to his grandfather's voice. If they shut this place down, it wasn't because they finished. It was because they failed. That failure had left scars, and someone was trying to erase them all over again. Just before sunrise, Jack heard a car engine. Slow. Close. He moved to the back door and peered out. Two men. Not Cole and Linton. These were younger. One carried a flashlight sweeping the dirt near the shed. The other had a duffel, like he meant to carry something out, not in. Jack grabbed the old shotgun from behind the fridge. Not loaded with buckshot. Just blanks. but loud enough to remind someone this was still his land. He stepped out onto the porch, cocked the hammer, let the click echo through the pre-dawn hush. "You're trespassing," he said, voice steady. "Next sound you hear won't be a warning." The men froze. One raised a hand not in surrender, but in signal. Then both turned and walked away. Not hurried, not scared, just done. Their SUV was parked near the fence line. It pulled off into the dark without headlights. When Jack checked the shed, one of the boxes had been opened. Half the contents gone. A sheet listing personnel rotations from 1957, missing. All that remained was a crushed cigarette butt and a plastic gas can cap. They'd been calm. They knew where to look. And they hadn't feared him. He drove to town that afternoon, the weight of decision pressing in like heat. He didn't go to the police. He went to the Lincoln Observer. Tanner was waiting, more alert now, more cautious. But his hands didn't shake when Jack placed the flash drive on the desk. "They were here," Jack said. "Took half the evidence. The rest is off property. Originals are hidden." Tanner nodded slowly. "All right. Then we go wide. Full drop. All platforms. Dead man's switch in place. If anything happens to us, it all goes live." Jack met his gaze. "Good. Because they're not finished." He drove home at dusk. The termites were still working, the mound already up another inch. As he walked back toward the house, he paused. New tire tracks. Not the ones from before. Wider. He touched the tread, feeling the fresh imprint in the dust. Someone had come again. While he was underground. This wasn't surveillance anymore. This was something else. The next play wasn't theirs. It was his. Tomorrow he would stop reacting. Tomorrow he would act. But first he had to make sure they couldn't erase him without leaving a mess. The fire didn't catch right away. Jack crouched at the edge of the barn, flicking a match into the kindling pile a second time. He watched the flame snake its way through oil-stained rags and dry hay, before it finally took slow at first, then fast the way a lie unravels when truth hits oxygen. He stood back, the smoke curling over the rafters. It was hot, angry fire, controlled but convincing. Exactly what he needed. 30 minutes later, the fire department would be on its way. But not before that he made his move. He walked across the east pasture toward the cathedral with 2 backpacks, one slung over each shoulder. One carried tools. The other held the last untouched copy of the materials he and Tanner hadn't scanned yet. Evidence no one else even knew existed. It was time to bury a decoy and protect the real prize. "Sometimes you have to lose something loud to save something quiet," his dad used to say. Jack figured that logic applied to Barnes, too. When he reached the mound, he dropped to one knee and opened the second pack. Inside were weathered folders stuffed with photos, copies of the site schematics, and transcripts from the tape, all marked with bold red, top-secret stamps that practically screamed for attention. A perfect lure. He tucked the bundle into the earth beneath the cathedral's western edge, deeper this time, where the clay stayed cold. Then carefully, he planted the first pack, the real archive, 50 yards east, under a dead mesquite tree where the soil had been undisturbed for decades. He covered it with precision. No footprints, no signs. If anyone came digging, he knew which one they'd fund first. The smoke behind him was growing now, and within minutes he saw the glow of headlights tearing down the county road. He smiled. Let them chase smoke. He had work to do underground. Back at the house, the barn was already engulfed, the sky pulsing with orange and panic. Two fire trucks sprayed it uselessly, water hissing off the metal roof. Neighbors had gathered. Hattie Mayfield stood by the fence with her arms crossed. She didn't wave. She just nodded once, grim and knowing. Inside the kitchen, Jack grabbed his keys, gloves, and a roll of electrical wire. Then he opened the trapdoor beneath the pantry and climbed down. He wasn't going into the old chamber this time. He was going deeper. He found the eastern shaft behind a stack of filing cabinets that hadn't moved since the Cold War. A concrete passage sloped downward at a steep angle lined with conduit and rusted security rails. The place reeked of copper heat and old science. No one had been here in decades. At the bottom, a rusted door hung off its hinges. Jack pushed through and entered a long room. This wasn't a storage bay or living quarters. This was a lab, or had been. Two tables, both overturned. Broken beakers, melted plastic, splintered equipment that looked more like weapons than research tools. And on the far wall, a glass viewing window looking into a chamber so black it seemed to suck the light from the air. He stepped closer. Inside the chamber was a column of stone. No, not stone. Something darker, smoother, not man-made. It stood about 6 feet tall, rooted into the floor, like a tooth in a jaw. Beside the glass on the wall was a series of photographs. Progression shots. Time-stamped. The column had grown. Not been built, grown. Each shot marked a subtle shift in shape, mass, and surface texture. And beneath the last photo, a line scrawled in red marker. Do not allow exposure beyond 4 minutes. Jack stared into the dark chamber. Nothing moved. But he felt it. A vibration. A low pulse matching the hum from the other room. Like something alive, just barely restrained. He turned away. Not from fear. From certainty. They hadn't shut this place down because it was abandoned. They shut it down because they lost control. He moved to the adjacent wall where an old communications panel sat half-ripped from the drywall. He began pulling wire, carefully stripping connections, rerouting power feeds from the breaker box. He wasn't just trying to document anymore. He was prepping the room to be triggered remotely. A detonation if needed. He'd plant a signal booster tomorrow, sync it to a burner phone. If anyone tried to take what was under here again, they'd find themselves standing on a landmine wired to secrets they'd rather keep buried. As he finished the last connection, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Tanner. They came to the paper. Took my server. I got out. Meet me. Jack's pulse jumped. He yanked his bag over his shoulder and ran back through the shaft. As he reached the base of the main ladder, he paused. He heard breathing. Not his own. He killed his light. Silence. Then a single footstep above. Slow. Deliberate. Jack pressed against the wall, heart pounding. Another step. Then the creak of the hatch above swinging open. Whoever it was, they were inside his house now. He reached slowly into his jacket, pulled the stun grenade he'd found in the lab storage earlier, and counted down from 5. Then he yanked the pin, rolled it up the ladder shaft, and turned away. A flash. A crack like God slapping concrete. He climbed fast. At the top, smoke. A figure staggering. Dressed in black, visor down, confused and disoriented. Jack tackled him into the pantry shelf. They crashed to the floor. Jack tore the helmet free. Underneath, young mid-20s, terrified. Not military. Private contractor. The patch on his sleeve read, Vantage Risk Control. Jack stood and backed away. Another shell company. Another layer between the truth and the people looking for it. You alone, he asked. The man nodded, coughing. Who sent you? The man wiped his mouth. Didn't say. Just coordinates an extraction order. We're not told what we're pulling. You get what you came for. The man looked at the open trap door, then at Jack. No, he said. Good. Jack knocked him out with one clean punch and tied him to the kitchen chair with duct tape. Then he sat down, opened the whiskey, and stared at the duffel on the table. Tomorrow he'd leak the first batch through burner accounts. But tonight, he'd wait. Because if they'd sent one man alone, they'd send more. The man in the chair was still unconscious when Jack slipped out the back door before dawn. He'd tied the guy tight, wrists bound to the chair legs, ankles taped down, mouth gagged. Not ideal, but Jack wasn't about to leave his house unguarded without some insurance. He'd already removed the man's phone wallet and comms. No ID, just a burner. All standard Black Ops protocol. They weren't playing games anymore, and neither was he. The sky over Lincoln County was smeared in purple and gold, the sun dragging its weight over the horizon like it too had seen too much. Jack took the back road into town, old gravel, kicking up behind the truck like smoke. His mind was already racing. The last 24 hours had confirmed everything. They weren't just watching. They were extracting, erasing. Which meant he was on borrowed time. He found Tanner parked in the alley behind the gas station, hunched over the steering wheel of his dented Subaru. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands jittery on a lukewarm coffee. You look like hell, Jack said, sliding into the passenger seat. Tanner exhaled through his nose. 3 unmarked vans, 20 minutes after you left. Tore the place apart. Took every drive, every backup. Even my typewriter. They're scrubbing. They're erasing, Tanner said, voice sharper now. But I managed to get one copy out. Uploaded to a dark storage server out of Singapore. Not enough for the full dump, but enough to blow a few heads off. Jack handed him a flash drive. This has the rest. We go public tonight. Tanner hesitated. You sure no turning back from that? Jack looked at him. They came into my house. Sent someone to crawl through my walls. I found something below that bunker that doesn't belong to science or nature. Tanner took the drive and nodded. Then we drop it. Jack leaned back in the seat, cracked his knuckles, and stared at the rising sun. This isn't about exposure anymore, he said. It's about accountability. Tanner glanced over. You think they'll let it get that far, no? Jack replied. Which is why we're not just dropping files. Tanner blinked. What else do you have? Jack opened the glove box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Coordinates, dates, and a name written in blocky government-style font. Franklin B. Calloway. The same name stamped across the Hollow Point site files. Let's see what a sitting congressman has to say about ghosts from 1954. 3 hours later, Jack and Tanner sat outside a private airstrip just south of Albuquerque. A Learjet idled on the tarmac, engines whining softly. This is reckless, Tanner muttered. Good, Jack said. A black SUV pulled through the chain-link gate and parked 50 feet from the plane. 2 men in suits stepped out first. Then Franklin B. Calloway himself, silver-haired, sharp-jawed, with a face made for campaign posters. He walked toward them with a gait that said power wasn't worn, it was bred. You're the ones making noise, Calloway said. Jack didn't stand. You're the one who buried a federal disaster under my land. Calloway smirked. You read half a file and think you know the whole game. I read enough, Jack said. You funded Project Hollow Point, authorized Site B. You signed off on deep mineral vibration experiments and unregulated structural drilling. Calloway leaned closer. You think this is about a bunker, son? That chamber wasn't a mistake. It was an opportunity. Jack narrowed his eyes. Calloway continued. In 1953, we found resonance anomalies under Lincoln County. Energy fluctuations unlike anything we'd recorded. Not seismic, not man-made, self-generating. Tanner stiffened beside him. You're talking about power, I'm talking about intelligence, Calloway said, voice low. Something older than our systems, something that doesn't obey natural law. Jack stood. Then why bury it? Calloway's smile vanished. Because we lost control, he said flatly. The structure responded to vibration, to emotion, to memory. It started mimicking, then projecting, mimicking what Jack asked. Us. The word dropped like a stone in still water. Calloway continued. 3 men went missing. They came back 2 days later. But they weren't right. Didn't speak. Didn't eat. Just watched. We sealed the chamber. Left the mound to grow. Figured nature could keep what we couldn't. Jack took a step forward. And now Calloway said someone woke it up. For a moment, all 3 stood in silence. Then Jack said, "You're trying to cover your tracks. Kill the story." "I'm trying to prevent a second incident," Calloway said. "You think your little leak will warn the world? It'll only attract more eyes, more interference." Tanner held up the drive. Too late. Calloway looked at Jack. "You want a martyr's story, fine. But ask yourself if it starts spreading. Whatever's down there. How many bodies do you want it piled on?" Jack didn't blink. "You already buried too many." Calloway's jaw flexed. He nodded to his men. They stepped back toward the SUV. "This conversation never happened," Calloway said. He got into the vehicle and drove away. Tanner exhaled. "He didn't threaten us." "No," Jack said. "He doesn't have to." That night, Jack returned home to find the man in the chair gone. The duct tape lay cut on the floor. The back window shattered. But nothing else touched. No files missing. No equipment disturbed. Just a message. Written on the wall in black marker. "We're not the only ones listening." Jack stared at the words, breath caught in his throat. They weren't just being hunted by the men in suits. They were being watched by whatever still lived under the ground. He walked to the edge of the East Range, flashlight in hand. The cathedral glowed faintly in the moonlight. But now it wasn't just a mound. It was breathing. The surface pulsed in waves, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The hum returned low, full of memory and weight. This wasn't just a geological anomaly. It was alive. Not just sentient. Awake. Jack stood still, the flashlight trembling in his grip. And that's when he heard it. A voice. Not loud. Not distant. It came from within the mound. It said simply, "Jack." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It didn't echo across the range or shake the ground beneath Jack's boots. It simply existed inside the stillness, as clear and intimate as breath against his ear. Jack. His name. Spoken by something that should not have known it. He stood frozen, staring at the termite mound, pulsing in the silver moonlight. The glow was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable, each swell of the mound's surface moving like it had lungs beneath the dirt. Jack stepped back, heart pounding. The flashlight in his hand flickered once, then steadied. He didn't move closer. Didn't dare. The voice hadn't come from behind him. It hadn't come from a speaker or some hidden surveillance device. It had come from beneath, from the thing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Tanner. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked slowly back toward the house, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The hum stayed with him, low and constant, vibrating under his skin, like a warning wrapped in static. Inside the kitchen was dark. He didn't flip the lights, just locked the door and slid down to the floor, back against the cabinets, trying to process what he'd heard. It wasn't possible. And yet, something down there had said his name, not guessed it, not spoken it in passing, said it with intention. He sat there in silence for 10 minutes before finally answering the call. "Tanner," he said quietly. "Jesus, Jack. Where have you been? I've been trying you for half an hour." Jack's voice was steady but low. The Mound spoke. There was a pause on the line. What I heard it. My name. From inside. Like it knew I was there. Another silence. "Then you need to come to town. Now. I think I found something." Jack closed his eyes. "What I traced the contractor who built the outer shell of Site B guys still alive. Lives off-grid north of Espanola. Name's Mitchell Avery. He filed for federal disability in 1960, same year Site B was sealed. What happened to him? They said it was an accident. Explosion. But his file has 4 redactions and a psychological hold order from a military doctor." Jack stood. "You trust him? I don't know," Tanner said. "But he was inside before they sealed it. Before they buried whatever that is." Jack grabbed his jacket. "Send me the address. I'm going tonight." Tanner hesitated. "You sure that's smart?" Jack paused, then said, "The thing down there knows who I am. I need to know why." The drive took 4 hours. The old truck grumbled over winding roads and canyon passes past scrub and rock until it reached a dirt trail that looked more like a memory than a path. Jack followed it to a crumbling trailer tucked into the edge of a dry arroyo flanked by rusted car frames and a clothesline that hadn't held clothes in years. He stepped out, headlights illuminating the trailer's front. A shadow moved inside. He raised his hands. "Mitchell Avery," he called. No answer. "I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a reporter. My name's Jack Whitaker. My family owns the land where they buried Site B." Still no response. Then slowly, the door creaked open. A figure emerged, thin, wiry back, bent like he was carrying something heavier than age. His face was sunken eyes, sharp but yellowed at the corners. A long scar ran from his temple to the edge of his jaw. "You shouldn't have come here," the man rasped. Jack stayed where he was. "I think you might be the only person left alive who knows what's really under that site." Avery squinted. "You hear it yet?" Jack didn't answer. Avery nodded like he already knew. "It always starts with the voice. Then the dreams. Then the remembering. Remembering what Avery looked off into the dark toward nothing. That it ain't just in the ground," he said. "It's in us." Jack frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Avery stepped down from the trailer, limping slightly. They thought it was geological or cosmic, some anomaly in the bedrock. But that thing down there, it's older than the earth, older than memory. And it doesn't just sit there, it learns. Jack felt a chill work up his spine. "What did it learn from you?" Avery turned to face him. "Fear, loss, regret. I went down there with 12 men, came back up with 9. What happened to the other three? They're still there, Avery said. Just not the way they were. Jack swallowed. You said it learns. Learns what? Avery leaned in close. It learns you. Piece by piece. Voice memory guilt. It pulls your thoughts out like wires. The more you interact with it, the more it starts becoming you. Jack took a step back. You're saying it copies people? No, Avery said. I'm saying it replaces them. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Jack asked, Why my family? Why my land? Avery shook his head. It wasn't about you. It was about access. Your grandfather Sam, he didn't just work there. He tried to warn people, got labeled unstable. They erased him same as the rest. You weren't supposed to find any of this. Jack felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. This thing, it's not just dangerous. It's manipulative. Avery nodded. It wants out. Jack turned toward the truck, mind reeling. Then we need to make sure it never gets the chance. Avery put a hand on his arm. You're already too late. Jack stared at him. What do you mean? Avery's voice was quiet. Tired. The fact it said your name means it's already inside you. The words struck like ice in Jack's chest. He didn't argue, didn't ask how, because deep down he already knew. The dreams, the hum, the familiarity. It wasn't reaching out. It was reaching back. Jack got in the truck and drove back in silence, headlights cutting through the black. And as the night stretched around him like a noose, one thought rang louder than the rest. It doesn't need to escape to be dangerous, just to be remembered. Jack barely remembered the drive home. His hands gripped the wheel until the leather creaked, eyes fixed on the dark ribbon of highway cutting through the desert. The horizon glowed faintly, one long, bruised streak of dawn, but the light didn't comfort him. Avery's words wouldn't leave his head. The fact it said your name means it's already inside you. He could still hear it. Not Avery's voice. The other one. The one from the mound. The one that shouldn't have known him, Jack it had whispered. Not loud. Not human. Just knowing. By the time he reached the ranch, the world was silent again. The sun crawled up behind the east range, spilling red light across the land. The cathedral stood where he left it, its surface slick with dew. The air above it faintly trembling. He parked the truck engine still running and got out slowly. No birds, no coyotes, not even wind. Just that strange hum buried deep beneath the soil. A pulse, a memory. Jack walked toward it with the careful dread of a man approaching a grave he might find his own name on. All right, he muttered under his breath. You want me, I'm here. The mound didn't respond, not in words, but the ground beneath his boots gave a faint shudder. Alive. He dropped to one knee, touching the damp clay. It was warmer than it should have been. Not sun-warm, body-warm, like the earth itself was breathing. And for a moment he felt it. A flicker behind his eyes, a memory that wasn't his. He was looking through someone else's hands, thicker, older, holding a flashlight that trembled. A voice whispered, "We shouldn't have opened it, Sam." Then the world went black. Jack stumbled backward, gasping. He recognized that name. Sam. Samuel Whitaker. His grandfather. He pressed his hands to his face, breathing hard. What the hell are you doing to me? No answer. Just the hum rising like an engine warming up for something inevitable. He turned and ran. Inside the house, Jack poured a whiskey, then another. The taste barely registered. His reflection in the window looked foreign. His own eyes seemed darker shadowed at the edges, like the thing inside him was learning how to look back. The phone buzzed on the counter. Tanner. Finally. Jack answered on the first ring. "Where the hell have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you for hours," Tanner said, voice cracking. "They're moving faster now." They hit the Observer again, this time with a court order. Sealed the office, seized the files. National security clause. It's federal now. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "You still have the backups?" "Most. But listen, it's not just us anymore. They raided 3 other local servers. Some of those files are already gone. Deleted, completely wiped." Jack took a slow breath. "They don't knock on doors. They knock down foundations." "Exactly," Tanner said. "And you're next. I saw a black Suburban parked near your road when I left town." "Same plates as the last one." Jack's pulse quickened. "Then we don't wait anymore. We drop everything tonight." "That's suicide," Tanner said. "You go live with this, now they'll bury you under more than lawsuits." "These guys play for keeps." "Good," Jack said. "So do I." Tanner sighed. "All right. But if we're doing this, we do it smart. I need a distraction, something to split their attention." "You still got that guy tied up at your place?" Jack glanced toward the kitchen. The empty chair, the cut tape on the floor. "He's gone," Jack said. "What? He got out?" "But he didn't take anything." Tanner swore under his breath. "They're not amateurs, Jack. They don't send one guy unless it's to test the locks. You've got less than a day before they send real muscle." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Then we hit them first." There was a pause. Meaning what Tanner asked. Jack walked to the window, staring out at the horizon, where the cathedral loomed faintly pulsing, like a living heart under sand. "Meaning I'm done defending," he said. "It's time they feel cornered for once." By mid-afternoon, the sun burned high and merciless. Jack loaded his truck with every file drive and document he had left. He stuffed them under the passenger seat beneath a tarp and a can of nails. If they stopped him, it would look like just another rancher hauling scrap. Halfway to town, he noticed the black SUV in the rearview mirror. 2 cars back, keeping distance. He took a sharp right onto a dirt road leading to the canyon wash, tires spitting gravel. The SUV followed. He drove faster, dust storm rising behind him. Then he cut the engine. Silence. The SUV slowed, then stopped 50 yards behind. 2 men stepped out. Same suits. Same sterile posture. Jack grabbed his rifle, stepped out, and stood by the truck door. One of the men lifted his hands. "Mr. Whitaker, we don't want this to get ugly." Jack aimed low toward the ground. "You're a few chapters late for that. We just need what you took from the site," the man said. "That information isn't yours." Jack cocked the rifle. "It's on my land." "It's not your land," the man said, tone flat. "It hasn't been for 70 years. Jack took one step forward. "Then why the suits? Why the silence? Why the graves with no names?" The man didn't flinch. "Because what's under that dirt doesn't belong to anyone. And if you keep digging, you'll find out why your grandfather begged us to seal it." Jack froze. "You're lying." The man's expression didn't change. "Avery told you, didn't he? It learns. It remembers. You think you're the first it's spoken to?" Jack's stomach dropped. "You can't control what's coming," the man said quietly. "You can only decide whether to be buried by it, or with it." Before Jack could respond, the second agent reached for something inside his jacket. Jack fired. The shot cracked the silence wide open. The man went down, clutching his shoulder. The other ducked behind the SUV. Jack jumped back into the truck and slammed the accelerator. The tires screamed, spitting dirt and stones. In the mirror, he saw one of the men stagger up, shouting into a radio. It didn't matter. He was already gone. By dusk, Jack reached Tanner's office again. Tanner was waiting, bags under his eyes, laptop open on the counter. "You look like hell," Tanner said. Jack tossed the drive onto the table. "Let's make them choke on the truth." Tanner nodded. "Already got the upload in motion. Once it hits the servers, they can't take it back." Jack turned toward the window. "They'll come for us first. Then we better give them something to chase." Tanner typed furiously. The upload bar crawled forward inch by inch. At 9:12 p.m., the lights flickered. Then the file name appeared on the monitor, Project Hollowpoint. Full release initiated. Jack exhaled. But before relief could set in, Tanner's phone buzzed. He picked it up, face draining of color. "What is it?" Jack asked. Tanner turned the screen around. A text. No number. Just one word. "Alive." Then coordinates. Jack's breath caught. "That's—" "I know," Tanner said quietly. "It's Mabel." Jack stared at the screen, heart pounding. Alive. Just one word followed by GPS coordinates that pulsed on Tanner's phone like a heartbeat. Mabel's name wasn't on the message, but it didn't need to be. The coordinates placed the location 17 miles west of Hollowpoint, just off an abandoned state maintenance road that hadn't seen fresh gravel in decades. Tanner looked up from the screen. "That's near the old mining pit. You remember, before the fires, before they sealed it up?" Jack nodded slowly. "I thought that land was condemned. Maybe that's why they chose it." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the duffel bag he kept behind Tanner's desk, already packed with flares, rope water, and 2 sidearms. "You sure this isn't bait?" Tanner asked. Jack zipped the bag shut. "It's always bait." Tanner stood pale but determined. "Then let's bite back." The drive to the coordinates took them through terrain more ghost than land-parched, lifeless fields under a moonless sky, where old power lines swayed like skeletal fingers against the dark. The road turned to gravel, then sand. Soon, even the dirt trail disappeared, replaced by tire scars in dried mud. Jack killed the headlights a quarter-mile out. The last stretch they walked. The hum began again before they even saw the structure. Not loud, just present. A low, vibrating resonance like memory trapped in stone. They crested a ridge, and there it was, a concrete entrance carved into the canyon wall, surrounded by floodlights and fencing. No signage, no guards. It didn't need any. Tanner whispered, "If she's in there." Jack didn't look at him. "Then she's not alone." They slipped down the slope, keeping low, avoiding the lights. Jack scanned the perimeter, no cameras, no movement. Just the unnatural stillness of a place designed not to keep people out, but something else in. The keypad by the door glowed faint red. Jack knelt, pulling a small black device from his jacket, an RFID repeater Tanner had cooked up weeks ago. He pressed it to the pad. It whirred softly. Then click. The door opened. A blast of cold air rolled out, dry and stale like a tomb. They stepped inside. The corridor sloped downward, rough concrete walls lit by intermittent bulbs, flickering like dying stars. Symbols were etched into the walls, not words, not letters, but something more primal. Shapes that made Jack's stomach tighten for reasons he couldn't name. Tanner stopped. "Jack, are you seeing this?" Jack nodded. They're not human. How do you know Jack didn't answer? He didn't have to. At the bottom of the ramp, the corridor opened into a vast subterranean chamber. The floor was slick with condensation. At the far end stood a reinforced door, sealed, bolted, but vibrating softly as if it were breathing. Then they saw her. Mabel. She was slumped against the wall just 10 feet from the door, wrists bound, hair matted with sweat. Her eyes fluttered open as they approached, blinking slowly, like someone coming out of a deep sleep. Mabel, Tanner whispered, kneeling beside her. She focused on him, then Jack, and her voice came out in a rasp. "You're not supposed to be here." Jack cut her bindings. "We came to get you," he said. She shook her head. "No. You don't rescue people from something like this. You barter with it." Jack froze. "What does that mean?" Her eyes filled with tears. "They didn't take me. I went." Tanner reeled. "What are you talking about?" "I thought I could bargain. Give them what they wanted. Buy time. Buy you time." Jack's voice was ice. "Who is they?" But Mabel didn't answer. She turned slowly toward the door, the one that hummed. It began to open. Jack jumped in front of her, gun drawn, but Mabel reached out and grabbed his wrist. "No," she said. "You shoot, you lose. That's the rule." From the opening came light, but not artificial. It pulsed warm and golden like sunlight through water. Then something stepped through it. It wasn't monstrous. That made it worse. It looked like Jack, but not quite. A little too smooth, too perfect. The angles of his face softened just enough to make the imitation uncanny. The figure looked at him and smiled. "You're not whole anymore," it said, using Jack's own voice. Jack didn't speak. Couldn't. The thing turned to Tanner next. "Your memory of her," it said, nodding at Mabel. "That's how I found her. That's how I knew where to go." Tanner backed away, horrified. "You're inside us." "I am you," the thing said. Jack finally spoke. "What do you want?" The figure stepped closer. "To continue," it said. "You built your lives on silence, secrets, buried things. We are those things. We are what happens when truth is denied too long." Jack raised the gun. "I don't care what you are. You're not walking out of here." The thing didn't flinch. "I already have." Jack fired. The shot echoed like a thunderclap, but the figure didn't fall. It vanished like a ripple disappearing into still water. Gone. Jack staggered, eyes wide. What was that?" Mabel stood slowly. A projection. Not a person, not yet. Tanner said, "So it's trying to become real." "It already is," she whispered. The floodlights flickered overhead. The air grew colder. The hum was rising stronger than before. Mabel grabbed Jack's arm. "We need to go, now. This place is a node, just one of many. They use it to surface, to learn, to replace." Jack's voice was a whisper. "And how many have they already replaced?" Mabel looked at him and said nothing. That was answer enough. They ran, back through the tunnel, through the keypad door into the dead canyon air. No pursuit, no alarms, just the echo of their own footsteps, and the thing Jack couldn't stop hearing. "I am you." At sunrise, they reached the truck. Jack didn't start the engine. He just sat behind the wheel, breathing hard, hands trembling. "What now?" Tanner asked. Jack stared into the middle distance, past the hills, toward the cathedral, still pulsing faintly on the horizon. "They're not done," he said. Mabel leaned forward from the back seat, voice ragged. "No, they've barely started." Jack finally turned the key. The engine roared to life. He looked at them both. "We go back." Tanner blinked. Back to the house, Jack shook his head. "No. We go deeper." The cathedral looked different now. It still stood in the same place, still towered like a monument of earth and bone, but something had shifted. The angles were sharper, the curves unnatural, like the mound had started sculpting itself into something new, something closer to them. Jack parked the truck 20 yards out. No headlights, no engine running, just silence and dread pressing in from every side. "You sure about this?" Tanner asked from the passenger seat. Jack nodded. "We're not getting answers from the outside." Mabel climbed out of the back. Her face was pale, lips cracked from dehydration and stress, but her spine was straight. Whatever she had endured down in the node had burned away the fear. "This thing knows we're coming," she said. "It probably wants us to." "That's fine," Jack replied. "Let's find out why." They made their way toward the cathedral as the first hints of dawn cut across the sky. The hum met them before their boots touched the base. Louder now, rhythmic, almost welcoming. The trapdoor was already open. None of them had touched it. Jack stared into the darkness below where the ladder descended into the belly of the earth. He took a breath, then started climbing. Tanner followed. Mabel came last, closing the hatch behind her. The bunker hadn't changed. Same walls, same lab, same corridor. But the air was different, denser, humid with memory. The walls pulsed faintly under their lights as if listening. They passed the sealed chamber where the mirror once stood, the one that had mimicked Jack's body. It was gone. No structure, no residue, just the faint outline of dust where something had once stood. Jack swallowed hard. "It's moved." Tanner raised an eyebrow. Whereto Mabel didn't answer. She didn't need to. They all felt it, the pull deeper, toward the sub-level hatch. It hadn't been opened in decades. Rust ringed the bolts. Mold climbed the walls, but the keypad beside it blinked green. "Looks like someone already punched in," Tanner said. Jack pressed his palm against the door. It slid open, revealing a stairwell chiseled into rock and steel. Ancient. Forgotten. He led them down without a word. They descended in silence, each step taking them further away from the world they knew and deeper into something older, something buried for a reason. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a narrow tunnel reinforced with thick plates of lead and iron mesh. Their footsteps echoed. The hum grew teeth sharper, vibrating through their skulls. Jack stopped as the tunnel bent left. A door waited ahead, vault thick, sealed with a rotating wheel lock. Next to it, a plaque covered in dust. Tanner wiped it clean. One word engraved in steel: Project Hollow Point. Mabel stared at it like a name she'd dreamed of but never spoken aloud. "This is it," she whispered. Jack reached for the wheel and turned. It screeched, stiff with age, but gave way. The vault creaked open, and what lay beyond was not a room. It was a chasm. They stood at the edge of an immense underground space carved into the rock, like a cathedral hollowed by time itself. Columns rose like ribs. Stone platforms floated in the dark, some with machines long dead, others covered in cables and translucent panels humming faintly with power. And in the center, suspended in midair, was a core, a sphere, spinning slowly, covered in lattice-like etchings that shimmered when they moved. It wasn't floating through magic. It was floating through memory. Jack stepped forward, jaw tight. What the hell is this? Mabel's voice was quiet. It's not a machine. It's a mind. Tanner looked around, stunned. This was never about geothermal research, was it? Jack shook his head slowly. They found this, built around it, tried to study it, control it. And when they couldn't, Mabel added they buried it, like they buried everything else. As they stepped onto the central walkway leading to the sphere, the hum rose into something more complex. Words, phrases, not spoken aloud, but heard internally in voices they recognized, their own. Memories. Jack heard his father's voice, drunk and angry. Tanner heard the moment his brother died in the mine. Mabel heard the silence after her mother's final breath. Each step forward was a step deeper into personal trauma peeled back and displayed like a slideshow of shame. Jack clutched the railing. It's not just showing us this. It's feeding on it. That's how it learns, Mabel said. It's how it builds copies, imprints. They reached the platform beneath the sphere. The air was cold, charged. A small terminal sat at the center. Still functional, lights blinking. A cracked monitor displaying Command Initiate Restoration. Tanner frowned. What does that mean? Mabel's voice cracked. It means we can wake it up. Jack turned. It's already awake. No, she said. This is just the reflection. The real consciousness, it's dormant, fragmented. But it wants us to restore it. Tanner stared at the prompt. Why us? Jack met his eyes. Because it knows we're broken enough to say yes. No one moved. Then Jack stepped toward the terminal. I need to know what they did here, he said. What my grandfather tried to stop. Mabel reached out. You don't dig for the truth this deep unless you already know it's going to hurt. Jack hesitated, then typed yes. The platform shuddered. The core pulsed. A wave of heat rolled through the cavern. The walls lit up, etched memories flaring like veins of fire. Faces appeared. Ghosts of workers, scientists, soldiers, screaming, begging, vanishing into static. Tanner dropped to one knee, clutching his head. Mabel cried out, staggering backward. Jack stood frozen as images flooded his mind, his grandfather screaming through a radio. Don't let them bring it topside. It's not done forming. A child identical to Jack standing in a test chamber, eyes black. A man being overwritten, face melting, reforming into a duplicate. Then darkness, silence, and a single voice. You've restored what they feared. Now tell me, what will you become? Jack collapsed to the ground. The platform dimmed. The sphere stopped spinning. Behind them, the vault door slammed shut. Sealed. Tanner whispered, dazed. It's in us now. Mabel didn't answer. She just stared into the core, whispering the only word left in her throat. Why Jack slowly pushed himself up, blood on his temple. Eyes full of something deeper than shock. We don't need to fight it, he said. Tanner stared at him. What are you saying? Jack turned. We need to show it. Jack didn't speak for a long time. The core hovered in silence, its pulses faint, now subdued. But the energy in the chamber wasn't gone, it had just shifted, settled, like a beast that no longer needed to roar to prove it was in control. Tanner leaned against the rail, sweating, trembling. Show it. What the hell does that mean? You want to negotiate with something that hijacks people's moans. Mabel stood nearby, staring at the console that had triggered the flood. We already did. The moment we came back here, we started feeding it again. Jack took a slow breath, voice hoarse. That's all it's ever wanted. It doesn't want war. It wants belief, occupation through infection, through story. Tanner's eyes burned. It doesn't need to kill us to win. It just needs to convince us we already lost. He looked at Jack like a man betrayed. Is that where this ends? We just let it in, let it rewrite us like files on a hard drive. No, Jack said, stepping toward him. We fight, but we fight on our terms. Tanner scoffed. And what are our terms, Jack? We don't even know what this thing is. We know enough, Jack said. We know it learns. We know it imitates. And we know it's trying to replace. Mabel looked up. What if it already has silence? The idea hung there like smoke. Jack clenched his fists. That's why we don't leave this place until we figure out how to undo it. Tanner's voice dropped. Undo it, Jack, we're trapped. That vault door closed like a tomb. Then we find another way out, Jack growled. We follow the wiring. The power's still running. That means there's another control station. Mabel turned toward a narrow hallway just past the platform. There's something down there. I saw cables, machines. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed a lantern and moved. The corridor was tighter, the walls closer, the hum rising in pitch again. Not loud, but sharp, like it was tuning itself. They reached a steel door that opened without resistance. Inside was what looked like a long-forgotten control center. Monitors coated in dust. Switchboards. Racks of servers that blinked faintly, still powered by whatever ancient system was keeping the cathedral alive. Tanner moved to a console. Looks like it's all on a closed loop. No uplink. This thing's completely isolated. Mabel tapped on a cracked glass panel. Not isolated. Preserved. Jack ran his hand along the edge of a monitor, clearing dust until the screen flickered to life. Lines of code. Names. Log entries. Then video. The grainy image of a lab years ago. Workers in white coats. Men in military uniforms standing behind a glass window. Inside the chamber, a boy. 9, maybe 10. Sitting still. Too still. The file was labeled Subject WH09, Mimetic Conversion Test. Phase full imprint initiated. Jack leaned in. The boy's face was familiar. Too familiar. It was him. He staggered backward. No. No, that's not possible. Mabel's voice was soft. It's not you. It's a prototype. Tanner watched the footage in horror. The boy tilted his head toward the camera. His eyes were black. His mouth moved, but there was no sound until the video's speakers caught up, "Hello, Jack." Jack's breath caught. The boy on screen smiled. Jack slammed the monitor off. How long have they known? Tanner replied. Since before you were born. They cloned me, Jack asked, the words foreign in his own mouth. No, Mabel said. They fabricated you. The original Jack Whitaker, your grandfather, was the last man to shut this place down. But what if the thing in that core built a fallback? A version of him it could use later. Jack backed into the wall, overwhelmed. You're saying I'm not real. I'm saying you're not just real, Mabel said. You're an echo. Tanner nodded slowly, bitter realization sinking in. An echo with a purpose. To bring us back here. Jack laughed, humorless. So what, I'm beta carrier? Mabel stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. You're the only one it can't predict. That's why you still matter. Suddenly the power surged. Lights flickered. The console screamed with static. All three of them turned. A second monitor lit up. Another feed. Live. A camera in the upper level. The farmhouse. The living room. Someone was standing there. The figure turned slowly toward the lens. It was Jack. Again. Only this one smiled with none of Jack's hesitation, none of his pain. Just cold, mechanical confidence. Tanner whispered, "How the hell is it back up there?" "It's not," Jack said. "It never left." The screen glitched and the image spoke. "I'm the version that accepted the truth," it said. The power surged again, and then every monitor across the console bank lit up with images, more duplicates, different faces. Some Jack recognized from town, others he didn't. All smiling, all watching. They'd already started. Tanner pounded the console. "We have to stop this. There's gotta be a kill switch." Jack stared at the spinning core outside the window. No kill switch. Just one last door. Mabel turned to him. "The old geothermal shaft. We didn't come that way because it was flooded. But if the power's been rebooted, it might be open again." Jack finished. They moved fast. Back down the corridor, past the spinning core, toward the far end of the cathedral, where a sealed bulkhead waited its rusted seams, now gleaming faintly with moisture. Tanner tapped the panel. "Pressure lock is live." Jack raised his hand. Mabel caught his wrist. "You sure?" she asked. Jack looked back toward the chamber, toward the core, pulsing like a heart that never should have started beating. "No," he said, and opened the door. Beyond it, dark water, and a tunnel leading down. Mabel clipped a lantern to her belt. "We don't know how deep this goes." Jack's eyes didn't waver. "Then we find out." They stepped into the darkness, one by one, the water rising to their knees, then waists. As the door sealed behind them, the echo of the voice returned. Inside Jack's head. "You brought them home," it whispered. Jack didn't answer. But in his mind, something shifted. If this thing wanted his memories, it was about to get all of them, even the ones that hurt the most. The tunnel narrowed as they moved. Water lapped at their waists, then their chests. Every step down the old geothermal shaft felt like a step further away from the world, above a world Jack wasn't sure existed anymore. Behind them, the cathedral had sealed. No turning back. The lantern lights cut a pale arc through the black, catching glimpses of rusted pipes, fungal blooms, and the occasional whisper of movement in the water. The hum was gone now. Not silence, just waiting. Jack could feel it in his bones. The voice that had echoed in his head since the first time he touched the mound had gone quiet, but its absence only made the air heavier. Tanner trudged ahead, dragging the last of the gear through the rising current. "I don't think this was ever meant to be an escape tunnel." "It's not," Mabel said behind him. "It's a delivery system." Jack looked back. "You mean it spreads through here?" She nodded. "Whatever they sealed down here, they didn't just bury it. They tried to infect it back, to overwrite it with us." "And it didn't work," Jack said. "No," she whispered. "It just waited." The tunnel opened into a cavern unexpected and vast, with stalactites hanging like frozen claws from above. In the center, a rusted platform stood above a deep shaft filled with swirling water and mechanical arms long since dead. The geothermal chamber. Tanner scanned the walls. This whole place is built around a thermal vent. That's what powered the cathedral. This chamber's the root. Jack stepped onto the platform, staring into the abyss below. The heat here was intense, the air thick and mineral. The hum was returning not in their ears, but behind their eyes. And then the voice came back. You want to stop me, but you are me. Jack clenched his fists. No, I'm what you tried to copy, and you got it wrong. Memories surged his father's eyes, hard and ashamed, his mother's silence, the long hours under a sky that never gave anything back, the fight to build something from that soil, the grief, the anger, the love, the one thing the voice never seemed to understand. You think we're weak because we break, Jack said, speaking to the chamber now. But we're strongest when we put the pieces back together. Tanner tapped his shoulder. If we overload the core from here, we can collapse the shaft. Seal everything. The cathedral, the copies, the vault, all of it. But it'll take out everything, Mabel said quietly. This whole mountain. Maybe more. Jack looked at her. That's why it needs to be done. She nodded once. No fear. Just understanding. Tanner began setting charges, what few they had. Enough, if placed right, to cause a chain reaction through the decaying infrastructure. You sure you want to do this? He asked as he worked. Jack stared into the pit. I was made from this thing. But I'm not it. I choose who I am. Right now, I choose to end it. They worked quickly, placing charges near the supports, the power conduits, the ancient cables that still pulsed with stolen thought. With the last device armed, Tanner turned to them. This one's got manual detonation. No remote. Mabel stepped forward. Then I'll do it. Jack stopped her. No. I'm the reason it's awake again. It ends with me. She looked like she might argue, but stopped herself. You're not the reason, Jack. You're just the one who finally stopped running. He smiled, small, sad. Then maybe I was real after all. Tanner and Mabel backed toward the access lift, still miraculously powered by the emergency system. Jack stayed behind, one hand on the detonator, eyes on the swirling abyss below. As the lift rose, Mabel watched him until the last second, her lips moving with words he couldn't hear anymore. When the chamber was silent, Jack knelt by the edge of the platform and closed his eyes. I don't know what you were, he said to the voice. A parasite, a reflection. Maybe something ancient we were never meant to touch. He opened his eyes. But I know what I am. And then he pressed the trigger. The light was instant, blinding. The heat ripped through the chamber with a scream of pressure and fire. The shaft exploded upward, molten rock and steel, tearing through the cathedral's roots like a blade through rot. Above ground, the mound buckled, caved in on itself, sucking air into a void it could no longer contain. A shockwave flattened trees, blew out windows for miles, and sent dust spiraling into the dawn sky. At the edge of the blast radius, Tanner and Mabel crouched beneath a ledge, the earth shaking beneath them, the light illuminating their faces like sunrise born of judgment. Then silence. Total. The hum was gone. Forever. Weeks later, a government task force arrived in Hollow Point under the cover of a geological emergency. What they found was a crater scorched and unnatural, but no clear explanation, no trace of a facility, no evidence of life. They cordoned off the area, classified it, filed it deep where no one would read it. But rumors spread about voices in the soil, about memories that weren't your own, about a man who walked into the dark to keep the rest of them in the light. Tanner left Hollow Point and never came back. Mabel stayed for a while. She rebuilt the ranch, quiet and stubborn. No interviews, no memoirs, just silence and the sun and a chair on the porch that no one ever sat in again. And beneath it all, peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace that comes when truth is faced head-on and survived. Not all stories end with monsters slain or worlds saved. Some end with the knowledge that you are more than the worst thing you've ever been part of. Jack Whittaker never came back. But in the dust, in the silence, in the morning air, where the cathedral once pulsed, something better grew. Something real,